Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, you've had a distinguished career, your career, foreign service, but your department is responsible for giving us knowingly false information, and I want to just go over it quickly. As the committee did its oversight over the PRM's assistance, we were told, and I'd ask that she be given copies of this, and I'll ask that it all be placed in the record. And I'll quote, this was in January of 2023, and again in December of 2023. Legal assistance, PRM, has not funded and does not fund legal representation or counseling related to immigration proceedings. Again, later in December, from the government of Mexico, PRM does not fund legal representation or counseling related to U.S. immigration proceedings, and legal assistance provided to those in Mexico is solely for the Mexican legal processes. At this moment, under, make sure I say it right, under the rules of Title 18, or U.S. 18, Title 1001, is that a true statement, either of those?
Congressman, PRM funds.
Ma'am, that's a yes or no. It really is. Are those true statements?
Yes.
Okay. Then if you'd please give her a copy of this. Are you aware of this packet that was used throughout 2023?
Yes.
Does it limit to legal activities in Mexico, or does it on pages 9, 10, and 11 clearly advise people on how to get asylum in the U.S.?
This packet of information, Congressman, was not funded by PRM. It was funded by the UN Refugee
Was this
Agency.
organization at this time under funding from the United States?
The organization was. This packet was not produced with U.S. funding.
One of the problems with the title I mentioned to you is that it makes it a crime to use tricks or mislead. Were you aware of this activity under other funds while you were funding this organization?
Congressman, this slide deck and these briefings were begun before I was confirmed as Assistant Secretary.
Ma'am, they were going on during these days of those statements. Right in the middle of it, the packet says May of 2023 was the revision. I'm going to go back to the original question because I think it's the most important question for you today as a Senate confirmed officer. Were you aware of this packet?
I became aware of the packet when we were producing documents for the Congress in response to their requests. I had not seen it before then.
What disciplinary actions or other activities do you envision when Congress has been told something in writing that is untrue, and then you discover this?
Congressman, again, I repeat, this packet was not funded by PRM. We became aware of it when the—
Ma'am, I'm going to make something very clear to you. The intent of Congress is not to use the fungibility of money to give an organization that goes out with the people that you are funding, and those people and that organization do something inconsistent with what you tell Congress and what your mandate is. Money's fungible. As long as you give to this organization, which I understand you're still funding around the world, and they have a dual purpose, and they use that dual purpose to do something that Congress clearly doesn't want. Nowhere in this deck, we'll call it UN funded for a moment just to humor you, nowhere in this deck does it suggest that you can seek refuge in Mexico, which under international law you have not only a right to, but an obligation to. Isn't it true under international law that every refugee in Mexico, if they're not Mexican, is by definition eligible to seek refuge there, and Mexico is at least one of the countries before the United States? So at a time in which every individual handed this had traveled into Mexico, a country that would have required visas if they, and or a claim of asylum to let them in, they were allowed in only because your organizations, along perhaps with the UN, was in fact funding their trip to the United States. In other words, you were part of conduiting people to circumvent international law. Every one of those people, Haitian, Chinese, whatever, you're so proud of helping, had a right, and Mexico had an obligation. We circumvented that at federal taxpayers' expense so they could come to the United States, where we are spending $150 billion a year in support of them. Mr. Chairman, I have no further questions. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Issa, and we will do further rounds if